Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhi no Bhavantu. May all beings be happy and peaceful. Phoenix here. Welcome to my channel. Those ever so pernicious negative cycles that we tend to fall into from time to time. Sometimes it's a seasonal thing. Usually during the winter, there can be some depressing months in there, especially if you live in a cold climate. Or maybe it is event driven. Maybe there's a certain injury or sickness that you suffer. For me personally, I have been going through an injury that I haven't really shared a whole lot about. Actually, a couple of surfing injuries, surfing some waves that were probably a little bit too big for me. And one in particular really smacked me literally and figuratively. And I want to share this with you because I want to also break down exactly how I've been working to get through the negative cycle that it seemed to plunge me into. But first, I'm going to drink from this amazing juice here that I just made. I actually have juice and tea this morning because I've been in the mindset of what is the most loving, generous thing that I can do for myself. And this is one of my techniques for getting out of a negative cycle. But the first thing is to be able to recognize the trigger. So let me take a sip here. That's really good. I definitely love having a little bit of cilantro and ginger and turmeric. I didn't have any turmeric today, but it just really gives it a nice kick. And it's sort of like, it's like just the way that it feels in the body. There's just this alkalizing effect, and it's just one of many things that I can do throughout the day to really truly love myself. And I thought of the analogy of if you see a bird and it hits a window, it injures itself, it injures its wing, or it flies into a wall. The first impulse for most humans, at least, is to rush to its aid and to want to see it, of course, get back up again and fly away and live happily ever after. And some will even go to the extent of trying to nurse it back to health and do what they can to maybe feed it, especially if it's a young fledgling. But for us, when we get hurt, we just sort of kind of shrug it off and try and just take it and not really nurse ourselves in the same way. And, you know, I heard something that Jordan Patterson said, and it's become very popular, and it's, you know, treat yourself as if you're someone that you love deeply, that you really, truly, genuinely care about. And for whatever reason, this seems to be really difficult for most of us, myself included. I am able to do this with my children. I'm able to do this with strangers on the street. And it's been historically more difficult for me personally. And I think that this stems from this societal impulse to be really hard on ourselves, to feel like we have to meet these insane standards to be successful so that we will be loved and appreciated. Because deep down, this is really what we want and need. This is a primal need for us, is to feel like we're part of a community and that we're loved and appreciated for who we are. But where we go wrong is thinking that we need to jump over all these hurdles to get there, and that we need to somehow improve ourselves more than where we already are right now. And this is something that comes up in so many ways. So for me, it came up recently with a surfing injury where I was on a big wave and I was riding this wave down, but I was too steep on the wave. And I should have cut off to the side, but it was one of those waves that you don't really have a whole lot of time to react. And it was a messy day. And so the wave just tossed me off my board, and which is normally fine, but I was going so fast that I literally smacked into the water. I bounced off the water like a skipping stone, and I tore a bunch of muscles in my obliques and in my lats, and it literally felt like I was being ripped open in the moment, and I could barely move that side of my body for the next week or so. It's been almost 2 weeks now, and you know, that triggered a sort of a chain reaction for me, where I noticed that my trading was off. I noticed that I wasn't as happy. Even though I was making money, it didn't really seem to make a difference because I was hyper focused on the fact that I was injured and that I couldn't surf. And this is something that gives me a lot of sanity. And the reason that I mention all of this is because there's always a trigger there's always something that you've spent too much time focusing on, and that tends to throw you out of alignment to where you need to find a way to get back again. And so the first step really in getting out of a negative cycle, at least for me, and again, I can only speak from my own personal experience, it's to recognize the trigger and to take the time to go into the self-analysis. And this is where I think a lot of us, we skip this step because we're like that person that runs into the wall, and instead of nursing ourselves, we just get back at it, try again, get back up, try again, shrug it off sort of mentality. But no, not always. Sometimes you need to take time to rest and to gather yourself, to collect yourself. And so recognizing the trigger first and foremost, and then once you recognize the trigger, the second question for me, I think to myself, is this something that was within my control? What's within my control here, and what's not in my control? I can't control the past. I can't control that event. So in this case, it was the surfing injury, but maybe it was what someone else said or did. I can't control that. That's over and done with. What can I control here? I can control my interpretation of that event. I can control whether I see that as something that is propelling me forward on the path. It's a message from spirit, maybe to slow down, maybe to be more cautious in those types of situations, or not put myself into those situations. And see it in that light. And what is it that I can control here? I can control my attitude. I can control where I go from here. I'm going to drink more of my juice now because this feels really good for me right now. It's sort of interesting being on camera because at first, at least, you feel like you need to constantly fill this void. Like you need to somehow provide meaning to your audience, or they're just going to run away and slide off to the next experience, or swipe away, right? But I think that these pauses, not only do they give me time to reflect, but also it's more my authentic self showing up. And so that's actually why I have these beverages here, because it gives me time to do that. I don't need an excuse, but this is what I would normally be doing if we were sitting across from one another in the living room. So the next question that I think is the most important when it comes to getting out of a negative cycle, and it's not even that we need to have the idea like, I need to get out of this. I think that's the wrong approach. For me, I just think in terms of, how can I feel better in this moment? And of course, that leads to the question of, what is the most loving thing that I can do for myself in this moment? Today, it's wearing sweatpants on a rainy day. It's drinking tea and juice at the same time. And here's my tea here. This is a dandelion spice, and I love this mug. It makes me happy to look at. It's pretty good. It's a yogi tea. I highly recommend it. It's supposed to detox. I don't really care about all that stuff. I just care about how it feels in my body. So what is the most loving thing that we can do? And if you just ask yourself this question, like repeatedly, and mean it, and really search for the answer, I find that if we ask the right questions to spirit, and we have a specificity with it, then we're going to get the answers, especially if we take that time to pause and to listen, to really listen. This event happened for a reason. The injury happened for a reason. I'm going to interpret this in a way that is positive, that is going to lead me forward, because I know that the universe is trying to help me, is trying to show me a better way. And that is my own personal belief system. It doesn't mean that you have to be synced up with any particular religion. It's a spiritual way of life, because we are spiritual beings. because most of what we experience here is not actual matter. 99% or more of our reality is not in the physical form, and that's been shown scientifically. And so asking the right questions to ourselves, and of course self-talk is a big part of getting out of a negative cycle. But I think there's different degrees of negativity, and we think of negativity as something that we need to run away from. We need to somehow like stamp it out, bury it, get rid of it, right? Annihilate it. But it's just part of life. There's going to be shadow, there's going to be light. And we get to coexist. They get to coexist. We get to experience both, sometimes simultaneously. Just like on a sunny day, sometimes it will rain and the sun will be out. And that happens here where I live quite often. And it's a nice paradox, because that's the paradox of life appearing. And I believe that nature has all of the messages that we need to hear. All of the scriptures are written in nature. All of the wisdom of the ancients are actually ever present in front of us. And sometimes nature is giving us the indication that it's time to slow down. Maybe that's the winter months, wherever you live. And sometimes nature is showing up in our bodies as an affliction. And sometimes, for me, I've been feeling some dizziness since the injury and some fatigue. I've been tired. I've been needing to rest more. And so not forcing myself to sit at a computer and research or trade if it's not feeling good for me. And that's an example of what I can do to love myself in that particular moment. And I think that the more moments we can stack upon one another, the easier it is to get out of the negative cycle. And so if you think of it as running around in a circle, it's just eventually that circle starts to shift and the direction starts to change. And then you start to stack on top and you start to move in a different circle. And maybe it comes back and it revisits that former negative circle momentarily, but then it bounces off again and then it starts to form a new circle. So I'm going to have another sip of tea, and I'm actually trying to decide whether the juice or the tea is better. Of course, God would laugh at that question. I don't think there is really a distinction, but this is more like a yin beverage. It's colder, right? And the tea is the yang. And in Chinese medicine, they pour the two together. In the morning, you drink water, yin yang water, and it's supposed to help to harmonize the body. So back to negativity. It's kind of interesting when you start to recognize that you're in a cycle that you don't want to be in. The first thing to do for me, I start to analyze what are the interactions and associations that I'm having right now that feel a little bit draining or a lot draining. And I just slowly start to prune those, slowly and steadily. And I start thinking, okay, these interactions really didn't feel good. This conversation that I had, I didn't come away from it feeling happy and positive and full of energy. And that is really it's a very subtle distinction, but your body knows and your spirit knows. If you think about a person or a conversation, you'll instantly get that feeling. And so learning to trust that. And then also not just with your associations and interactions, but the activities that you're doing. So obviously, social media is something that is the first to go for me when I'm feeling stuck in some negative thinking. And because obviously that's going to create, it's draining on the mind. It's a strain. And then scrolling and seeing other people posting their lives, which really is sort of artificial to begin with, and the filters and all that. It's just kind of a waste of time. It's not very productive. And so that activity is out the window for me. What activities are really helping me to thrive? Meditation is really helping me to thrive. Even if I can only get 30 minutes in a day, even if it was only 10 minutes, I try and do a minimum of 30 minutes yoga is really helping me. Even though my body has been hurting, I'm still practicing yoga, and I'm making sure that I hit certain I hit certain habits every day. But everyone is going to be completely different, and it really comes back to self-love. And this is the pattern for this life, for this human existence. I think that humans, more than any other species on this planet, have the most difficult time loving themselves. It's like even a fox or a squirrel or a rabbit or a crow, they know how to nurse themselves when they're injured. They know when to pull back. They know when to hibernate. And they know how to take care of themselves to ensure their survival. But we get in these mental loops, and the activity that got us into the mental loop is what we need to be most cognizant of. Because that activity, obviously, it's like Einstein used to say, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. I don't know if that was Einstein. I think it was Einstein. Or insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome, right? So what was the thinking that got me into this trap, so to speak? What was the thinking that made me feel this way? And how did it, and you can start to see how it began to compound. And so there's really that decision, that ultimate, that moment where happiness it becomes a decision in each and every moment. But it starts with self-care, and it starts with acknowledging what is working and what is not working, and writing it down if you need to, and acknowledging that you have certain wants and needs, and if they're not being met, then it's up to you. It's your responsibility and no one else's to create the environment and the circumstances and the associations and the activities that are going to allow for that to happen, that are going to allow for your needs to be met. It's better late than never, right? It's better late than never that we start to reprogram our minds to think in terms of, I need to put myself first here, not in a selfish way. It's not selfish to put yourself first. It's not selfish to want to be a better person, to want to be in alignment, to want to be happy, to want to have positive associations, both within and without. That's healthy and necessary. And it's part of the process. So the main message, if there is one in this video, is that we all go through these negative cycles. But from the perspective of the universe, it's not really negative, it just is. And it's actually really positive in the sense that it's helping to bring us further, to bring us home, to bring us back into who we really are. And if we take it as the opportunity to dive in, to recognize the trigger, to ask what's working, what's not working, to make the necessary changes in our activities and in our associations, and both mental and physical, then ultimately it will come down to the question of, what can I do to love myself in this moment? And that will start to build more and more to where you won't be thinking in terms of, I'm stuck, I don't know how to get out. You'll be thinking in terms of, where am I going to go next? Where can I take this next? And so this process is a lifelong process, and it's part of being a human. And if we embrace rather than resist, then we feel better, right? Animals, that's the main distinction. They don't have the ego, they don't have the mind in the same sense that we do, and they don't resist. When we resist, we contract, and that's when we start to shut down. But kids, they don't do that. They haven't learned that yet. That's a learned behavior. So becoming cognizant, becoming more and more aware each and every day, and then following your gut, following your intuition, listening, asking the right questions to spirit, and expecting to get very clear answers. As long as you're paying attention, as long as you're tuned in. So taking the time to take the sacred pauses, taking the time to go for a run, taking the time to meditate, whatever it is that makes you happy, do more of that. Find time for it. You can always make time for it. Doesn't matter if you have a job, a 9 to 5. It doesn't matter what the circumstances of your life are. It's possible. It's possible, and it's highly likely if you're watching this video. And I would love to hear your comments down below. Maybe how some experiences that you've been through and how you got through them, or your special hacks for getting out of a so-called negative cycle, because this is how we collectively learn and grow. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and have a beautiful rest of your day.